What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the Mental Corner podcast, the show where I bring on guests from all different backgrounds to talk all the things mental health. I'm your host, Harry Potvin, and today I have the pleasure of being joined by Charles Collins. Charles is the Amazon best-selling author of the Lifecraft book series, which is a collection of novels that presents a framework to help make a masterpiece of your life through the application of craftsmanship. Charles was a lot of fun to talk to, and I want to thank him again for coming on and having this discussion with me. Now, before we get started here, guys, this episode is sponsored by Aunt Bertha. I've said it before, and I will continue to say it for as long as we are sponsored by them. I am a big fan of Aunt Bertha and the work that they do. So they are basically the leading referral platform for social services in America, connecting people seeking help and the verified social care providers that serve them with dignity and ease. They make it super easy for people to find social services in their communities, for nonprofits to coordinate their efforts, and for organizations to integrate social care into the work that they already do. Their huge platform is used in industries such as education, healthcare, and more. For the entire month of May, they joined the National Movement for Mental Health Awareness Month to work to destigmatize mental illness. Additionally, they continue to publish mental health resources on their website, findhelp.org, which is a free online resource directory where anyone can search at any time for free and connect with services in their area. The links to their main website and to findhelp.org will be posted in the description down below, and even if you're not in the New Hampshire area where Aunt Bertha is located, I definitely recommend checking these resources out. They're just super beneficial, and the work they're doing is so amazing for mental health awareness. So big shout out to Aunt Bertha. I love what they're doing. Now, before we get into it, guys, you know the drill. If you're listening, please like, comment, share, subscribe, give 5 stars if you're on that podcast platform. Share with someone who might want to hear this episode. It's a really great one, and I can't wait for you to listen. I'll talk to y'all very soon. Have a great rest of your day. Peace. Charles, thank you so much for joining me today, man. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Harry. I'm coming to you here from a little village outside of Strasbourg, France in the background, but in reality, I'm stuck in a bedroom in the back of an apartment somewhere on the East Coast of the United States.
Well, one can dream, right?
Yeah, that's it. That's all I got right now.
Loved it. Before we get too into anything, what got you inspired to, write your books and kind of go on this journey that you're on?
The initial inspiration was a question that my 6-year-old daughter at the time put to me, coming into the kitchen. I don't know what she was listening to or who she was listening to, but she said, "Hey, Dad, what's the purpose of my life?" And I thought she didn't think that one up by herself. She must have heard it from someone, or the things, the educational things that come on, and that they're exposed to. Some of them are brilliant, and some of them do get into this, kind of thing, and having kids think real early on. But what it really does is it makes parents think early on because you realize that you don't actually have, although you have answers. Like, I think I pulled a Mickey Mouse quote out of my hat, and I think that's what got her saying, "Dad, I'm not a kid. Come on, give me a real answer." And yeah, you can give them good answers. You can say it's about God's plan, or you can say it's about being nice to people, or it's about growing up and being healthy. You can say a lot of things that are good and are important. But after I thought about it for a while, I thought, that's not exactly what I wanted to say. And I realized I really wasn't prepped for that moment. I really didn't have a solid answer about what is your life's purpose. You could say, well, it's anything you want it to be, but that's pretty out there. And so I eventually found the answer that I wanted to give her, but it was quite a journey to get to that answer, years and years, now going on 35 years. But it was, the purpose of your life is to make a masterpiece of your life. And I wish that was the answer I had given her. But since then, I have given her that answer. And now we talk about it a lot. And she's got a 2-year-old daughter. So it'll be interesting to see how she answers that question one day.
Yeah, no kidding. Man, that is such a deep question for a 6-year-old. Holy.
And it's so funny, Harry. I've talked to a number of podcast hosts that have come back right back to me and said, their child might have been, one said a 4-year-old hit her with that question,
Mm,
but she said, yeah, I had my 8-year-old do it or my 6-year-old do it. So they do pick it up somewhere. And there is, depending on the child, obviously, there is some inkling, but they, when you start talking to them about it, they're looking at you and they're saying, come, do not give me a brush off.
yup.
I want authenticity. And it was that feeling that she wanted authenticity, which is what really nailed me, you know,
Mhm.
and that's what started me on the journey.
It's almost like, kids have their own filter on authenticity that, like, adults can't really grab. Like, when I'm, like, a camp counselor or I'm teaching kids, like, I always teach kids between 4 to 10, and
Okay.
those kids know. Like, if you're
Yeah.
lying to them, they're like, "Hey, hey, no, no, I'm not buying that."
That's exactly the feeling that they can tell if you know your stuff or not. If you're giving something, the word we're using here is authenticity. And that if you have time, um, if you don't sleep some nights like I used to, it starts going through your mind, which is what is the authentic answer? Um, and at the end of the day, this thing about authenticity and the journey which takes us into all the work that I've done, I think is something that is fundamentally one of the deepest down things that we want. When we get it from someone, when we get it from one another, it's greatly appreciated.
Mhm,
When we don't, and there's so much of inauthentic work and in or unauthentic product or messaging that's being put in front of all of us, and more these days in the opinions disguised as authenticity.
mhm.
Um, there's so much of that I think we I think we are almost thirsty for authenticity, because authenticity is based on long-standing work, expertise, practice, improvement. I mean, there's a lot of things we can get into here, and the work, the way of craftsmanship, which is the foundation of the work, all comes from that authenticity.
Yeah, and it's really easy now to just have no authenticity whatsoever, or, like, have no experience, have no work, and just go on the internet and spew anything, and people will buy it because there's no one, like, it's the internet. There's no one, like, mitigating who can say what to who.
Yes, and so I think we all appreciate that we are in a moment in time where that is an extraordinarily marvelous thing on the
Mhm,
one hand, that we as a species has been effectively and collectively unlocked, and that each individual human being has their voice and it can be heard around the world. That is also a circumstance that requires an extraordinary set of self filtering rules and guidelines and discernment
mhm,
to know the difference between authentic work, authentic thought, and something that has significant substance to it based on long-standing practice, versus what we do get, which is just a lot of folks pretending. It's almost like a magic show. Look at me. I can make myself appear as if I am a master of this or that, and because I've picked up what masters say and or how masters dress and or how they present themselves, so I'll pick up a few of those things, I'll put on their disguise, and lo and behold, because this is such a new medium, these people look and smell and walk and talk like we think masters do, and so a lot of people follow them, and it's like the Pied Piper leading the children out of the village down the garden
mhm.
path and over the cliff.
Yeah, yeah, there's a lot of rats that are following these Pied
There's a
Pipers, man.
that's right, yes.
That's why, like, when I put my show out and I put posts out, I try to emphasize, I'm like, I'm nowhere near a master at anything. I'm a student of life, man. I don't know anything.
frankly. I learn a lot from guests and from, my personal journey, but I would never go out there and be like, this is what you have to do.
Well, let me ask you a question.
Let's hear it.
Can you or would you share with us something in your life that you were drawn to or interested in, or possibly it was work that you had to do, in which you had to work at it daily and incrementally improve your capability at doing that thing? And over time, actually became somewhat or well skilled at it, and actually gave you a sense of kind of growing self-esteem as you achieved a little bit better levels of capability and excellence. Anything like that ever
Yeah,
happen?
yeah. No, I have a couple. So the first one I'm going to say is communication,
Okay.
because since I was a kid, I'm like antisocial social in a sense. So like I can take a lot, like I can talk to a lot of people, but in doses. Like I get exhausted after. But since I was a little kid, I've been practicing communication. I've been talking to everybody, reaching out. I was in theater. I was in like different clubs, different groups at school. So I always had to learn how to talk to people, how to like relate to people, how to communicate. So I think that's definitely been a one of the skills I've learned throughout life that I'm very confident in, and hence why I kind of have this show, to be honest. And then the other one, I mention this every episode, but I was a competitive swimmer for 11 years, and so that's a sport where it's very technical. Like you can have all the strength in the world, all the cardio in the world, but if you don't have any sort of technical skill, you're not going to go very far. You're very limited. So with swimming, it's like every day you're training either once or twice a day, and you're just working on those little things like the turns and the starts and the technique and the kick, the underwater. So that it's like little increments over time where you start to see the time drop, and eventually you kind of get into a rhythm of I've been here before, I know what I'm doing. And that's kind of, those are the two skills I have, I think.
So if you were to ask the question to me to open the conversation with your audience about the foundation of my work and the focus of what I do, it was studying people just like you who described what you just described over an 11-year period of how many times a week did you say you did that?
8 to 10.
8 to 10 times a week, an hour each time or more?
It would, yeah, like an hour and a half. Saturdays were 2 hours, but
Okay. You logged well over 10,000 hours
oh yeah.
in the practice of that particular craft, right?
Hmm.
This fundamental process of learning the knowledge around that swim craft, we'll call that for a moment, learning the processes associated with that craft, which were the motions, the movements, improving incrementally with excellence the turns, the kicks, the strokes, the breathing, the body strength, and tools that were used in the additional help and training and understanding of that. That journey that you took is a universal journey that humanity has been on since the beginning of recorded time, with any and every endeavor that it engages in order to achieve a level of excellence in the endeavor.
Hmm.
And that foundational work is called the way of craftsmanship. Craftsmanship is the word that I eventually got to after my daughter asked me the question that day about, and I came to the answer of making a masterpiece of your life, because what I ended up doing was going on a multi-year investigative journey to understand how we learn, teach, and improve our trades, occupations, professions, vocations in order that we acquire knowledge and skill and use of the tools of a particular trade. And when I say trade, I'm talking swimcraft, I'm talking any and every human endeavor, including communication craft that you've also described. And everywhere throughout the world, I found, both in ancient, what they've left behind as artifacts from ancient times, to the present day, that when we commit to effectively achieving incremental levels of excellence in given topical areas in our lives, that is the exact same process that every single trade and occupation goes through, every single one of them. Learn the body of knowledge, learn the processes associated with it, learn how to skillfully use the tools associated with it, and practice and incrementally improve, and practice again and incrementally improve. And the next day you go in, you do the turn slightly different than you did it the day before, and it continues to grow and develop. So I said to myself, using your exact, you have the imprint, as almost every listener in this podcast does today, already within you, of the way of craftsmanship, because you have already followed the way in one area called swimcraft, and you've also done it in your communication craft. So that study, from that question my daughter asked, was, I said, well, why can't we take this universal thing that we have all learned in one or several different trades or craft areas and apply it to all of life, the entirety of life? Why can't we focus all the different information and topics that we learn in life into a simplified curriculum, rather than having it being just this random nonsense and the only things that we organize are our trades, our professions, our vocations? Why can't everything else be organized and approached in the way of craftsmanship, just like we do these other things? I thought there must be a way to do it. And that's exactly what I ended up doing. And that's the results of my work. So that's what allowed me to go back and say to my daughter, after that journey, I've been on 35 years now, that at the end, the purpose of your life is to make a masterpiece by achieving incremental excellence in all the various areas of your life by applying the way of craftsmanship to everything you do. And now you're going to make your life a masterpiece, because you, the human being, you are the primary material of this craft called life.
Right. Yeah. Do you think that like the younger generations, which includes myself, I don't want to sound like, but do you think that the whole idea of craftsmanship and like making your life a masterpiece was lost in a way, just from, because now we just want quick results. We're kind of lazy in that way. We just want immediate reaction. Do you think that your whole idea was kind of lost with generations like mine?
I don't think so.
No.
I just don't think it's talked to the generation in the same way. This whole thing about kind of getting rich quick and finding shortcuts, is the whole reason why the gold rush in 1849 took place out to California, because everybody wanted to get rich quick. Everyone wants to find that shortcut to financial security, or, any other thing that we do. And I don't think that that's ever going to go away, right? Looking for the shortcut. In fact, I think that's part of, actually, believe it or not, the way of craftsmanship, because the way of craftsmanship is always looking at, as one of its elements, what are the processes that we are using here in this particular endeavor? And are those processes smooth and well connected? Can they be improved, just as the material and the skill of using your tools and whatever it is that you're doing? So the thing that I think gets lost or glossed over is that everybody listening to this, even in your story with swimcraft, everyone has that in their life somewhere. Everyone is probably, with exceptions, everyone has probably experienced that before, because you went right to it. And you took us through, without any prompting whatsoever, that universal practice, daily improvement, keeping at it, 10,000 plus hours, right, in order to achieve higher levels of skill in a competitive craft, right? So people know what we're talking about here, Everybody listening is probably pointing to something in their life that they can say, oh yeah, I've done that before in this or in that. Now, did anybody tell them that they were actually following this universal thing called craftsmanship, the way that it's really defined, what craftsmanship means, which is balance and excellence and incremental improvement in the outcome, the result? When you win, when you come in first or second or even third, and even to these days when you come in fifth and sixth because you're only hundredths of a second away from the person who landed in front of you, I mean, the level of competitive capability is just mind-boggling, right? Those things, the results are the results of all of that work. So if we're all doing this all the time in something in our lives, including the present generation, your generation, and we can find it, and we know it's there, and we know the work that it takes to do. So what's with all this stuff on the internet? Well, it's that same idea that's probably been around for 10,000 years since they built the pyramids. Oh, let's see if we can build it faster, right? Let's do pyramids there. Let's do the pyramids out of paper instead of stone. I mean, it'll be just a hell of a lot faster. But the idea is that because of the internet, you're able to broadcast anything. And so it's very seductive to think to oneself, wow, that looks like a master, and I can become a master, and it makes me a master in milliseconds. And how I made $1 million writing articles on medium.com, in a month. I mean, just all of these things. Those are the ones that people are constantly trying to hype. We all bite at that at some point in time or from time to time. But every single one of us listening today who has ever achieved something authentic, something well-developed, knows that it takes the time and the incremental practice and excellence. And so what happens when you achieve a certain level of excellence in something, let's say your swim craft? So somebody else comes along one day and tells you what a master swimmer they are. And you say, oh, really? Well, let's have a go. Let's do a couple laps, right? Or get on in and show me, your butterfly, or, go ahead, just do. And they get in, and in a matter of seconds, you're looking at them going, this person has absolutely no idea what they're doing. And how is it that you know that? Because you're the craftsman who knows that trade already. You already have an intimate knowledge of the processes and the time and the perfection of skillful execution that you went through. You now have this very strong, authentic filter to be able to look at that trade in particular, communication trade, anything that you've studied and become skillful in. You start becoming, very, very filtering in who else does it well or not. So going back to your original question, one of the things that everybody needs to look at is, so if they are the master of this or that or the other thing, stop for a moment and look at the actual results of their work. Go into their work. Go in and look at the depth of authenticity in that work. And this is like, someone who built a cheap house. Another carpenter comes along after you buy the house, and they come in to do a repair on your wall, and they look and they say, Jesus, I don't know who the hell built this house, but they have no idea what they were doing. The studs are in the wrong place. They didn't put the right amount of screws in the wall board. They didn't tape it off properly. And they'll immediately discredit the person who did the previous work because they were not craftsmen. They were fakes.
Yeah, we've had that in my house. Someone put a furnace somewhere where it wasn't supposed to be, and the other house or contractor was like, what was this guy thinking?
He wasn't.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. He wasn't
thinking. So this conversation that we're starting to have is the foundation of the work, making a masterpiece of your life, the book series, and the audio episodes that I was describing to you earlier. This is where all of that work comes from. It's been a 35-year investigation, study, research. into these fundamental principles that all started with a 6-year-old kid, my daughter, in the kitchen.
Wow. So the steps that you've come up with from your research, you have two different segments, right? You have the 5 elements and then the 4 phases.
That's correct.
So, do you mind taking us through the 4 phase? Let's go. Yeah, let's go with the 4 phases first. Do you mind taking us through those four?
So, in every trade occupation that I have been able to look at, they all share a similar structure in that they have a time frame during which the trade of the occupation is learned initially. Then there's a time frame where the practitioner now has a what we'll call a level of skill or practice capability in which they then seek to employ that competitively or in the marketplace or whatever. And then they finally start reaching a level in which they're considered to be, a gold medalist, right? They are at the mastery level, and the question is whether or not and for how long will they continue performing at the mastery level. And then finally, in most trades, occupations, and professions, there comes a time when all of those levels have been gone through, and people start turning around, and there is not that we don't mentor during those time frames, but there is a period of time in which they start dedicating, okay, let's now take a look at what we're going to leave as a legacy for the next generation, right? So that's the mentorship. So when I looked at all of those, they basically came down to, and these are the names that are used in most of these occupations. Phase one is the apprenticeship. And that means the learning phase. That's when you take on the knowledge and you're starting to become familiar with the body of knowledge that defines that trade or craft. The second phase after apprenticeship, and apprenticeship can last any number of years, is journey work. And journey work, as its name implies, you're going out, you're skilled, you're going to make your way in the world, you're going to make your money, you've got your tool belt on, and so forth and so on. Level 3 is then you move into mastery. And depending on the trade, occupation, and profession, there are tests and things that you have to pass in order to get from the journey work phase into mastery, right? And then finally, the 4th level, which would be mentorship. So if we conceptualize for a moment, if the audience sits back and says, okay, I get that. I've probably seen or heard or relate to that in some way. Then if we were to take the entirety of life, the 80 plus years that we're on the planet, as a single craft, life as a craft, and our job is to learn that craft and incrementally improve in that craft every day, working at it all the days of our lives, then that craft, just like every other craft, has the same 4 phases. Phase 1, apprenticeship, approximately age 14 to 24, 25, the learning phase. We're going through high school, we're going through college, university, we're going through trade schools, we may be going to graduate schools and whatnot, but it's primarily the period in time in which we're doing all of the brain learning, right? And we're also doing skill development in particular tools, equipment, whatever it is that we're going to be doing. Phase 2, journey work. We as men and women go out into the world, age 25 to approximately 45. And during that period of time, we apply ourselves as skilled practitioners in the trade. In the trade of life, that's the period in time when we're getting into our careers and jobs, we're raising families, we're doing all these other elemental things. We're building the foundation based on what we learned in apprenticeship. So if we learned apprenticeship well, we're starting to build the foundation of our family and our lives and our homes, right? So forth and so on. At approximately age 45, we now enter the 3rd phase, and we cross over from journey work to the Masterworks phase, roughly age 45 to 65. So now in this phase of our lives, we are now usually highly skilled. We're really tuned in. Many of us open our businesses during that period of time in our lives. Many of us have been successful, raising family, so forth and so on. We're building our wealth. We're building our knowledge. And this is the time where you start focusing in on your master works, your master plan, your masterpieces during that 20-year phase. And then finally, when you hit age 65, contrary to the stuff you might see on the TV and the internet, you do not retire, go out to pasture, and fall asleep. In the craft of life at age 65, if you're a practitioner, you are entering the mentorship phase in the craft of life, which runs from 65 to 85 and beyond. And in this phase, which is the phase I'm in now, this is the phase over that 20-year period where I'm gathering up artifacts, writings, my master's journal, and those things which I'm going to package and leave behind as a legacy to the next generation that follows behind me. So as a practitioner in the craft of life, I've got the whole thing laid out in 4 phases over an 80-year period of work that's going to be done in each phase as I continuously move towards the end objective of making a masterpiece of my life.
Mm. It makes life, it gives life a little simplicity almost, looking at it that way.
It does.
'Cause I feel like looking at life just head on can be terrifying sometimes.
It's totally terrifying. You know, most of us end up looking at life head on. I was looking at life head on just like everybody. My parents didn't have a system for teaching me life as a craft any more than I had one for my 6-year-old coming in saying, Dad, what's the purpose of my life?
Mm-hmm.
I did things the same way everybody else did. There are certain things that you learned through your training in your college or university or whatever. Our trades and crafts are very specific in that regard, but nothing else is. Everything else is intuitive, fly by the seat of your pants, trial and error, catch as catch can. You get a little bit from your mom. Maybe a friend says something. You hear it over a cocktail party. Somebody recommends a book, or you just punt.
Yep.
And in that regard, you sit back and say, man, do I just want to be driving with low head beams on a foggy night? And it's, maybe the deer's going to be in front of me or bugs are hitting my windshield. Do I want to go through life like half blind? Or do I want to go through life the same way one learns a trade? I want to get to mastery and then finally on to mentorship. So is there a way to do that? And that's what over the last 30 years, I've structured it that way so that anybody can approach it that way. And the beauty of it is it's universal. It works for everyone. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter your worldview. It doesn't matter anything. It's simply a way of thinking. It's a way of working. It's a way of doing. And you can move through those phases and know that it's the only thing that's different in this is that this particular trade yet does not have a global community of practitioners that are practicing the trade by that name, life as a craft. So you don't see a lot of masters, guild groups or journeywoman guild groups, that are talking with one another about being in that phase and what they're working on in their masterpiece. But one day maybe there will be, and there'll be, more people talking to one another. So in the meantime, you have to kind of set it before you on your own workbench and decide, I like this idea of being a craftsman of my own life. Mm-hmm. And making a masterpiece of my life. And I want to do it in this simplified way. So right now it's the pioneer phase for this trade.
Yeah. I've never heard of this. Are there more people like you who are kind of going about this whole craftsmanship idea?
Well, yes. I'm looking at one right now who told us about his craftsmanship idea as swimcraft over 11 years. So the answer is yes, we're all doing it. Mm-hmm. But are we practicing life as a craft, not just swimming as a craft?
Right.
And the answer is no. I haven't found anyone that is practicing life as a craft, not in these terms. Mm-hmm. There are people that do have worldviews from the cultures that they are brought up in and other things that have this formula or framework for, okay, this is what the universe is. It's how it's constructed. This is who you are in it. This is how you will live in it. And this is your behavior that you have to follow and so forth and so on. There are certainly those, and many people call those by different names, cultural worldviews, cosmologies, religions, whatever the case may be. And there are plenty of those out there. But most of those, in one form or another, kind of rub up against one another in what could be a friction or a competition or a disconnect in how those things are being looked at or done. It's like, the world is plumbing. Well, no, it isn't. The world is carpentry. Well, bang, and then and that's it. That's how they see the world. They say to a carpenter, right, everything is a nail, and to a hammer, everything is nails. You got to hammer it down. In the way of craftsmanship, as you've asked the question, it's universal to every culture in the world. And every culture practices craftsmanship. And if you find the word craftsman in that culture, and some of my writings take you on a journey to 7 different places and take you into those cultures and show you and talk to you about craftsmanship there, every culture has its word for it. But the thing that's really the most interesting about it is intuitively, we all recognize high quality craftsmanship when we come into contact with the finished work of a craftsman or a craftswoman. They're invisible. They're not there. For example, nobody knows. Did you ever win any of your swim meets?
I don't know. Personally, I think I was always top 3. I don't think I ever won anything.
Okay, well, there you are. So there's a whole, stadium of people. They don't know necessarily your name. Maybe they heard it on the loudspeaker. They don't know who you are, but all of a sudden you're in the water and it goes. And they're looking at you, and you and second place and first place are within milliseconds of one another. And the crowd can see the level of skill taking place in that lane that you occupy. And they're on their feet and they're cheering and they're out of their minds with delight by the level of skill they are witnessing by these craftsmen in the water, going at it neck and neck and touch it, right? We recognize superior skill and craftsmanship whenever we come into contact with it in whatever medium we see someone performing it, whether it's water or clay or the law, it's there. So this craftsmanship, which is the work that we give to the world, is a universally human, uplifting idea and experience that transcends cultures, transcends gender, transcends time and history. It's just ever present everywhere. And I've spent 35 years looking at all variations. And so now when I look at someone's work, whatever it might be, whether they've done it for pay or whether they've done it for personal fulfillment, love and enjoyment only, I'm looking first and foremost to see the level of authenticity, the level of craftsmanship. Is there balance? Is there functionality? Does it give to us, those who come into contact with it, something that builds us up, that improves us? Because in the way of craftsmanship, as it's taught to all the cultures of the world, but I've never seen anybody bring it together into a single uniform statement like I'm making now, they all promote the same idea. You do the work to fulfill yourself, but you must give the work out to society for it also to benefit. Otherwise, you're not a true craftsman. You're only a skilled artisan. So there is this purpose behind the word and the title of craftsman that is, in all of these cultures. I mean, reading Plato's dialogues, these guys go into it for page after page after page, talking about your work must have social impact, positive social impact. So now you start looking at all the people around us, politicians included, who supposedly practice statecraft, and they don't do it very well. And what are they leaving to the society as the result of their work? Either it's good or it is not. And therein lies whether they are a superior craftsman or not.
Right. Yeah. It's definitely interesting. I feel like I actually really like that way of looking at life. I feel like it also not only, like we mentioned before, I don't think it only helps in a sense simplify life, not simplify, but make it less intimidating. I think it also kind of gives you more of a sympathy towards other people, if that makes any sense. Because so like when we encounter people who have a different view on something or have a very strong opinion on something, you automatically criticize that person and you go, oh well, they're wrong and they don't know what they're doing, blah, blah. But if you look at it through your craftsmanship ideology, it's just, oh, that's how they were raised and that's how they were taught, and these are the ideas that were fed to them, and as they were growing up, this is all they knew. It almost gives you that, it puts you in their shoes better than anything else could.
Well, the reason that I'm not saying anything and I've just been a blabbermouth for the last half hour is because the statement that you have just made is the transformation that takes place inside you when you do start embracing this idea of being the craftsperson of your own life, and that life is effectively a craft to be learned, and that it has to be based on the principles of the way that we form and structure and teach our trades, occupations, and crafts and professions. Because if it is not done that way, it becomes this metaphorical idea of kind of, ethereal, that has no substance to it, right? It has no elemental foundation. Now, the reason I say that is because of the observation you made around looking at someone else and the way they're thinking about doing something, looking at something, and the way they're approaching something. And in the way of craftsmanship, this is called schools of practitioners.
Mm-hmm.
So every trade, craft, and occupation starts usually as a very simple idea, usually by one person who picks up a rock and bangs it and says, wow, I could use this. And they start banging. And then they say, wait, I could put it against this piece of wood. And they start banging against the piece of wood. Over hundreds and thousands of years, that becomes a craft. It now starts to talk about the wood, which is the primary material of the craft. It now starts to talk about the processes. It now talks about whether the wood is strong or is resilient or is it's weak. It talks about the tools being used. And then over time, that becomes a school of practitioners. And what arises in a school of practitioners of any trade, craft, or occupation are eventually a collection of teachers who watch and teach and then measure each student's proficiency in the craft over time before they'll release them and allow them to be a journeyman or journeywoman and go make their living from it. That school eventually, when its practitioners go out, may start to blossom or germinate other schools of practitioners who now start approaching that original craft with slight differences and modifications. Now, sometimes these schools can, especially within the same craft, can come into severe conflict with one another. Oh, you've left the orthodoxy. You are not following the truth in the school. In the Kung Fu, in the martial arts, this is very present. They're very proud about this whole traditional thing and they go at each other. But it's not just them. It's in schools of art, it's in schools of law, it's in many different things. So it is entirely possible, as you start developing yourself as a craftsperson of your own life, that when you do encounter someone else and you see the way that they are looking at something or talking about something or approaching something, oftentimes you can start to identify a particular school of practice that they came from or not. They may well be the product of an unstructured apprenticeship, of a very haphazard journey work, of from here to there, and not having formally understood the material, not formally having been trained, not formally learning to use tools and so forth. You can start actually looking at it very much in this way. And to your point, it may lead you to be compassionate or potentially less confrontational or less aggravated by what they're doing, because you're starting to see whether or not they truly are trained as a craftsman or craftswoman or not. And oftentimes that makes you feel a little bit different inside, right? And I don't want it to sound elitist, but I have to tell you, it starts really changing the way you look at everybody and everything. And there are very few people that impress you anymore once you get to this place. Very few people, because you start seeing right through them.
Mm.
You know what I'm saying? And to yourself, you don't take on yourself and start giving yourself, when you know that you haven't trained in a particular area or a topic, and that you've never gone through the 10,000 hours of skill and so forth, you yourself back down and don't go around acting arrogant as if you know something when you don't. So it
Right.
really changes you too.
Hmm. Some people need that, honestly. They need to, when they recognize that they're not in they're not experienced in what they're talking about, they should back down. There's people not in my life, but around my life, if that makes any sense, where they talk about a topic and you go, you really don't know what you're talking about. You're just doing this for the sake of looking good and arguing. And it's like, we don't need that right now.
There's a lot of that. In fact,
Mm.
that's what most of us are trained. That's life by intuition. That's life by trial and error. That's
Mhm.
the collage of trying to stick things together and trying to give the appearance of craftsmanship when there is no true substance behind it. There's no skill, there's no training. Yeah. And unless someone comes forward and presents to us an alternative to that, that life does not have to be a terror. It does not have to be this unknown constant brush with intuition and fate. It can, in fact, be approached and understood as a learned and practiced craft, and with a complete understanding that all crafts and trades are subject to hurricanes, wars, financial calamity. In other words, none of those things goes away in the world. They are all there, and we all practice our trades and crafts and professions in the midst of all of those things. But the alternative to life as just an unknown, terrifying encounter does exist, and it's called life as a craft if you want to learn it. So for a lot of folks, all of us, myself included, up until I actually was able to uncover that, wait a minute, it's all been sitting here in front of all of us for 10 million years. We just never applied it to our entirety of our lives. You kind of try to act as though you're kind of in control. Yeah, I'm cool. I'm with it. I'm down. I know what I'm doing. I know what I'm talking about. Right. And the truth of the matter is, we feel that way or behave that way unless and until we are able to latch on to the principles of craftsmanship at least once in our lives through something we have done: swim craft, communication craft, other trade or vocational. Once you have locked into something that you do well because of skill and time and learning, you can transition yourself to that and put yourself in that place and have pride and self-esteem in yourself that you are that and you have that capability. Now, if you lock back into that, people listening to this, when it does come to these other topics now, as you start going downstream, now start approaching those topics the same way.
Mm.
Now start saying, okay, now's the time to learn what's the knowledge of that topic. Now's the time to learn what are the processes. Now's the time to learn, starting to practice and go into those things. And you will now have a panorama of things in your life that you're quite skilled at, truly, because you understand the application of craftsmanship to all these endeavors. That's what starts making you a masterpiece of your life. And I can assure you, when you start to see yourself a skilled craftsman in all these multiple areas of your life, which was the question about the 5 elements, you actually start to have a level of self-esteem and self-confidence in which you start to glow. There is this sense of authenticity. You can call it centeredness, mindfulness. In craftsman's terms, they call it balance and perfection. And perfection, not in that something is perfect, but perfection is that it is a process in which it's improving and it's developing, right? And it's continuing and it's adjusting a little here and there as you go through. So it's a lifelong pursuit and practice. And when people come into contact with authenticity, we've just talked about it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they give off a different kind of energy.
They do.
Yeah. So those five elements you were talking about, what are they? What are the five?
So that's the curriculum that started with my daughter's question. What does she need to learn? Right.
Mhm.
What's it all about? What's the purpose? The craftsmanship and the 4 phases came after.
Mm.
But the initial component that came out of it was, what is the curriculum she needs to learn if she's going to make a masterpiece of her life, if she's going to have the skills needed? So we used to go to the library on Saturdays. And, the whole town is there on Saturday, by the way. So every kid and parent is there. Hey, how are you doing? And everybody's looking up the books for school homework and all the rest. And we would do the same thing. We would say, what are you thinking about today? What are you interested in? Oh, and they come up with a topic. So we'd go and try and pull a book off the shelf in the library. Here's a book about that topic. And let's read a little bit about it. So that little process started us creating a little 1-page cheat sheet about the topic. We put the name of the topic on the top of the cheat sheet. We put like a 1-page little definition about it and said, oh, okay, we learned a little something today. We used to take those home and they were just kind of there. It was kind of part of the day's work and it starts to kind of pile up and it's just sitting there. And it started to occur to me, this could become too big. This could become way, disorganized and unorderly. How the hell do we start getting our hands around this, right? And it's like, so I started thinking, well, wait a minute, the library is organized. It's kind of categorized. It's got different things, but there's no way I'm going to put library categorizations in the house. I won't have enough room for anything.
Mm-hmm.
So this is where that's the start of looking at the trades, occupations, and professions and saying, how the heck and what do they do and how do they do it to take this significant body of knowledge that you have to learn over time and break it into simplified chunks so that you can then go into each chunk, each bucket, and learn the topics, the subtopics within each bucket, and then incrementally get deeper and deeper into those topics. So you're beginner, then intermediate, then advanced, and so forth and so on. So I looked into how craftsman workshops around the world were organized and started going back into everything I could find about craftsman's traditions all the way to the present day in factories, today, which are big craftsman's workshops. And what I found was that there was this thing in the center of a workshop that the master craftsman running the workshop would place called the workshop journal. And it's one of like 5 different journals used in craftsmanship. And this particular journal is set in the center of the workshop. It has processes, it has procedures, it has some rules and regulations, and it has topical dividers inside the journal that break out different sections of knowledge or topics, information. And I thought, well, wait a minute, that would be a great way, to take all these little bits and pieces of paper of things we're interested in that are outside of school and organize them. So based on the Master Workshop Journal, we got a 3-ring binder in the house that you get at Staples or anywhere else. And we put, little tabs in there and we tried to figure out what are we going to call these tabs. So we looked and we said, is there any kind of unifying or, bigger umbrella over all these little micro topics that we can make this up simple? And we eventually boiled it down to what we called the 5 elements. And here's how it went. We said, well, if the human being, both the inner human being and the outer human being, physical and intangible, if the human being is the primary material of the craft of life, and if you are the craftsperson of your own life, the human being itself is going to be one of those master categories, right? Out of the 5 elements, because then you'll go into this human being. It's the material of the craft. And as in every craft, one of the things you learn is the material. Is it organic material or synthetic? If it's organic, where was it grown? Under what conditions did it come out? How was it then processed? Is it flexible or is it brittle? All the things you would learn in a trade and a craft. So the human being the primary one. Then the second one was, well, if we're going to work on that material, what does every trade and craft do when they work on a material? They use tools.
Mm-hmm.
So the second master element or category was tools for living, tools that we use on our inner self and tools that we use on our outer self. And in the way of craftsmanship, you weren't even allowed to touch a tool until you understood what its purpose was, how to use it, how to apply it with skill. So then we said, well, okay, so you got the human being, you got the tools, but human beings, if they're organic material like a tree growing in your yard, they have to start somewhere. So where do human beings start? They start in gardens called families. So another element out of the 5 is called family and personal heritage, the place from where you came from, the stories and the people who came before you, the heritage in which you currently exist in the culture and the world around you, and the heritage or legacy you are going to be leaving behind for the next generation who's going to come and learn from where you were. So we said, okay, so that's good. That's 3 out of the 5. What's the next one? Well, we realized that every family heritage lives inside a home, a household. Pretty much most of us grow up in a home. Some are dysfunctional and broken and don't work well, and others do. And like a craftsman's workshop, if you don't run your family and your household like a well-run workshop, the way a master craftsman does, you have a lot of unhappy employees living in that household, right? So, the rule of the day is not what I say and go to your room, right? In other words, the idea should be processes or procedures or rules of the house. Everybody talks about them and uses them, but we never think about them in the same way you might think about it running a master workshop. So that was the other category. And then finally, the last of the 5th element was family and personal finance. Because the thing we learned in studying the way of craftsmanship was that a workshop could not be opened until you became a master. And then once you became a master, you had to apply to the guild to open a workshop. And they required that you knew your trade well, so that you were a master already. And then they required you had to go on for additional training to learn how to run the workshop as a successful commercial venture. So we said, well, wait a minute, that's exactly what families and households have to do. It has to be a successful commercial venture. Otherwise, the family is poor. Otherwise, they don't have the resources they need. Otherwise, the caregivers, the mother, father, however that, blended family, however it operates, they may be in conflict with one another because they don't have a set of financial processes or objectives. So that became the final one. So when you go to the work now and see the 5 elements, they are element 1, family heritage. Element 2, family management and household management. Element 3 is family finance, personal finance and management. Element 4 is the human being, the material we're going to work on in this trade. And element 5 are the tools, what they are and how we use them. So every topic that we found in the library, we could go to the book and we could put a 3-punch hole in it, and it fit. It absolutely fit in any one of those 5. And that's how we started growing it. And the result of that was a workshop journal in our house. We didn't read it all the time religiously, but it was there. It was a family heirloom. It's a heritage. That became the book, Making a Masterpiece of Your Life, on Amazon. That's what's in there.
Why has no one looked at life as a whole like this way? It seems so much more, I'm trying to think of the word. It just makes so much sense.
Because I think that's why. Because isn't it amazing? The thing, I get to ask that question every single time. Mm-hmm. And part of it, I think, has to do with, we've been talking about this to one another this way, believe it or not, forever. But every once in a while, someone comes along and talks about that thing which everybody's been talking about and doing anyway, with a slightly different tone or a slightly different presentation or idea, color, whatever. Because if you look at everything I'm saying, none of it's going to be new to anybody.
Right.
Not, I mean, everything I said, pretty much anyone can point to in their own life, so I don't have to be anybody's guru, which I don't want to be. But somebody comes along and says, hey, have you looked at that garage lately? Yeah, it's the place where I put my car. Well, did you ever put it in this way before? And they go, oh my God, I've been putting that damn car in that garage for like all this time. But look, you just did that little thing. And so now look at what you can do with the rest of that space over there.
Mm,
That's cool. Well, that space was there all the time. I didn't invent it.
right.
So who knows why somebody comes along. I don't know why. I don't know why I looked at it this way. I don't know why, but one thing leads to another, right? I mean, you have a conversation with someone yesterday on a podcast, or with me today, or someone else tomorrow, and the next thing you go is, geez, I never looked at it that way. And here we are. I mean, just two guys having a conversation. But yes, the work that it took to get here was 30, 40,000 hours. I mean, of continuous refinement and boiling it down. But that's what craftsmanship is all about. And now to give that work and present it to the world and let it speak for itself. So when people go to, where you've seen some of my work, when you go there and you experience that work and you see it, it will speak for itself if that individual takes the time to look at it, not just glance at it and just walk away. But I know that when people see it, that if they have a chance to hear me talking about it with someone like yourself, this kind of background dialogue maybe has them go back and look at it in a deeper way than they would have before. And connect dots in a way that they would have before. And perhaps this is why I found that I'm now pursuing this idea of working only with podcast hosts to bring out this knowledge rather than, directly being a podcaster or anything myself, because I think that the podcast hosts ask me the questions, they draw out this, well, wait a minute, what about that? And how about this? And, those kinds of things, to the point where I think it'll be much more useful, people listening to you asking me the questions, for them to potentially look at life this way now, get under their skin. They're going to wake up at 3:00 in the morning and go, no, I don't know, man, that craftsmanship thing. I don't, it's like, and all you have to do is connect it to something in your own life that you've gotten good at. And that's me connecting with you, because you already have it within you, right?
Right.
But
So
it's
it's
practical. It's not, oh, you have the universe within you and the stars will expand. And I'm sorry, I'm just not there. What you have within you is the 10,000 hours of work you've done on something, the results you've achieved on something. And craftsmanship is about achieving results, something tangible that can be shared with the world.
Right. Yeah. And we need more of that. We need more craftsmanship. I feel like people in the pandemic, I think there's going to be a lot of negatives to it, but I think one of the positives is that like people have been taking time for their crafts because they've had time. I think we're going to come out of this with a lot of new new projects, new talents, new ideas. I'm hopeful anyway. I mean, what do I know? But yeah.
Yeah, I don't think, to your point, I think what we are doing, you and I right now, I don't know that the time was right for me to do it before. I don't know that anybody would have been interested or taken the time to pay attention to having a conversation with a guy that life is a craft. I mean, what are you talking about? I mean, you just don't know, but it's so matter of fact. It's so practical. It's so everyday. you can approach it, looking and doing things this way in your normal conscious mind. And this is the thing that used to trouble me about too many of the other kinds of things, whether it was a worldview that made you believe in something that you really couldn't see, or, and some people are very good at that and can embrace that and make substance from it. I always, and I don't know. I mean, when I go to the great beyond, but what I do know is that right here and now, this thing that is practical and so human and has always been human and has always been with us, we if we paid attention to it and lived our lives according to this, certainly the only thing I can say is every time I get better at something, pride in myself increases. My own self-esteem, my own skill level, I'm getting better at. Oh, I did that better. Oh, it's not quite right, but I did it better. And I'm thinking to myself, craftsmanship has you thinking and doing that all the time. And if you're truly doing it in the way of craftsmanship, you're doing it in a balanced way. Because craftsmanship says, if you stress that material to its breaking point, you are not a craftsman or a craftswoman. You're just still practicing as an artisan because you have overlooked the element of balance necessary in creating that finished work. So don't stretch that material to the edge of the breaking point. Know what it is, but don't break it. Well, if I'm the material, then I better not be pushing myself to the breaking point. I must be trying to achieve balance. Stress the material, right? And then, a lot of people ask the question, I don't know exactly what it is that, what medium I want to, work in besides my life. What are the things, like maybe a career or something that I'd like to do? I'm not quite sure I found it yet. And where is it? And how do I go about it? Craftsmen have some amazing quotations for things like this. One of them is a guy named George Nakashima. And he lives in New Hope, Pennsylvania. And he's a master woodworker. And his work, his furniture is known all over the world for its fascination. One of the things he wrote in his book called The Soul of a Tree, he said, when I look at a plank of wood, sometimes I'll have to look at that for 5 years or more to try to figure out what I'm going to do with it. You see, wood has a tremendous yearning to fulfill itself. And if I don't fulfill that yearning, the wood will remain frustrated and unfulfilled. So here's this master craftsman talking about this organic material called wood that sometimes will take years to find just the right use for it. So those of you listening who are craftsmen and craftswomen and becoming and taking on this idea of being a craftsperson of your own life, if you're looking at your life right now and you've tried something, but you haven't quite found it, and you're looking at this thing and you haven't quite found it, a master craftsperson has to look at that material. It may take 5 years or more, right? It takes time for you to find the proper use for that material. Take your time. That's what a craftsperson does. And then begin that work in earnest, right? Try it, but then begin that work in earnest. And when we start looking at ourselves this way, we let ourselves off the hook in such a huge way that we don't have to be this mega movie star, rock star, $1 million entrepreneur, whatever the case may be. We're truly trying to find the right use of our material, but remembering we have to achieve something, because a craftsman or craftswoman always achieves a result, always has a finished product. You just don't sit there and daydream. You get work done.
Right. Man, wise words. That's a great way to look at life, man. Where can my viewers find you?
MyLifeMasterpiece.com. We'll drop them at the Life Masterpiece Journal, which is the culmination of all the work I've now put in one place. So you'll see the 5 elements are there, and you'll see the audio and articles are there. You'll see the 4 phases of life as a crafter there, and the way of craftsmanship is there. And it'll take you on a journey around the world, listening and hearing about different craftsmen's traditions and whatnot, and give you a good foundation for really having a method by which to become a craftsperson of your own life, and not just this being a conversation that you'll forget in 15 minutes, right? And that was great, but it's gone. No. So I had to leave a result behind. Otherwise, I wouldn't be true to my word.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, I 100%. Charles, this was a lot of fun, man. Thank you. Thank you for coming on. I appreciate.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate
you and your time, man.
Thank you, Harry.
And to all my viewers, I will see you guys next time.